All right, another Happy New Year, another stretch of January movies. There's always a horror movie in these January anyhow. Let's do it. So The Grudge is a sequel to The Grudge, I think. Anyhow, I'm gonna be honest. I saw The Grudge once in theaters, so that's many years ago, and I don't remember much about The Grudge. I remember and Sarah Michelle Gellar. That's what I remember. And the scene where the thing's under the bed sheets and drags someone to hell, I guess. So this looks to be a continuation of that world, and if I had any inkling that if you remember the original Grudge, oh, that'll make this movie better, I would say that. But I don't. I never get that feeling. This movie fails in its own right. Remembering the original Grudge is not going to make this one better. But the premise of The Grudge is when someone dies under extreme distress, they remain this hateful, angry entity called a grudge, and then they terrorize the next person, which really sounds more cliche in terms of horror movie as I'm saying it out loud. That's pretty much the gist, right? That's what a lot of these ghost haunting angry entity movies are. So now we have another one, only this time it concentrates on the cops more, which I want to give props because that's actually an interesting idea. A horror movie that concentrates on the cops investigating what's happening, because usually it's the family, like, oh, our house is weird, let me dig through some files. This one's like, no, the cops, they're gonna investigate. It actually links to a couple of other families and a couple of other stories. I mean, there have been horror movies with cops before. That's not new, but in terms of execution, I feel like they wanted to make this like the movie Fallen, which I've referenced before, but I like it. Because when I think of Fallen, the cop element, the police element, that's a huge part of Fallen. It's a police investigation that ends up leading them to a supernatural place. Kind of like a Stephen King story or something. I feel like that's what they wanted to do with The Grudge. And in the end, it just came across as a boring horror movie. But that's what you have. You have an interesting premise. Because every crappy movie started with a premise that someone was like, oh, that's interesting. Every, if not most, bad movies are a failed attempt at making a good movie. And that probably starts with a premise someone thought, oh, that's an interesting twist or take on it. This movie is half cop movie, 1/4 family haunting movie, and 1/4 other family haunting movie. Because it does a couple of time jumps and you see a couple of families who have lived in this house. It's like this movie, they were like, we want to make a Grudge trilogy. We're not getting a trilogy. Wham! Just crushed it into one movie. And it gets a little confusing. You're like, all right, right, we're there now. Right. January movie. And it's all about execution. I'm down for a movie jumping back and forth. Hell, Tarantino's best film is all about that. But this just didn't stick the landing of it. You have a good cast though. You have known actors, horror movie legend actors, otherwise good actors you have seen be good in other things. But they don't do much of anything. It was clearly a case if they were like, all right, we need recognizable faces that people might know from other horror movies or other movies in general. I just feel like the characters could have been played by anybody. There's a part of me that thinks, well, maybe the reason they feel light is because essentially a couple of them are just flashbacks. It's not giving enough time for them to be fleshed out because the movie's dividing your attention among different characters in which their stories take place a couple years apart each. But I really feel like if this movie didn't do that, the characters would feel just as light. It just didn't give them enough to do. I mean, it's a horror movie, right? So we gotta talk about the scares. They're not here. It's not a lot of scares. There's not a lot of scares you don't see coming. I want to give them props. For one jump scare in particular, it didn't have a loud sound. It was a bassy sound. It made a sound. It wasn't like screeched your ears. No, it wasn't like that. It was more low frequency. I appreciated that. Thank you for recognizing that a high audible sound making your nerves tense to fuck up is very different than you legitimately being terrified. That said, I also wasn't legitimately terrified. I mean, at this point in horror movies, I feel like I've seen a lot of things, so I'm not looking for laying on my back, staring at my ceiling in the pitch dark in my living room after a hit of salvia scared. But an element of fear would be good in a horror movie. It's just a bunch of crap you've seen 100 times before, and you see all of it coming a mile away. Which is funny because a supernatural movie, but it concentrating on the cops' perspective and them investigating and finding their way into the supernatural world. Isn't that what Todd McFarlane wants to do with the new Spawn movie if it ever gets off the ground? Anyhow, that's always concerned me, and after watching The Grudge, I'm like, that's why that concerns me. Because what you potentially have is an interesting concept, but what you have in reality, in the case of The Grudge, is a really sloppy movie that comes across as just boring. And I cannot stress that enough. This movie is insanely boring. And in the end, The Grudge didn't offer anything new. A lot of the cool scenes you saw in the trailer, the scene with the hands in the hair. Is that on the poster? I can't think of it right now, but I think it might be. Thanks for showing the best part in the poster. I feel like this movie could somehow be re-edited to possibly be good. Until then, yeah, thanks for the dog shit. All right, so The Grudge, the new one. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Or what's your favorite and or least favorite horror movie? Or January horror movie? Let's get interesting. Whatever they are, whatever you think, comment below, let me know. And as always, if you like what you've seen here and you want to see more, click right here to see more.